Welcome back to another episode of Running with Wolves, Season 2. We're back, bitches. I'm so excited. Today, we're going to talk about something that I am deeply passionate about. I genuinely love talking about this topic, and this is perfecting your sales pitch. Now, for those of you that don't know this about me, my background was actually, before I started my business, I was in marketing, and I was also, I'm going to say that again. For those of you that don't know my background, when I originally started my business, I had come from a I had come from a background of operations when I started my business with my dad, and I was 18 years old. I did operations, marketing, and sales, did a little bit of everything. And then I went and I did medical sales. I did like surgical sales. And then from there, I went and I worked for a marketing agency. And when I tell you guys, I genuinely considered just like going into sales straight up, because I really, truly love it. I think it makes such a difference. And I think when you can do it correctly, you feel like, I don't know what's happening right now. And I think when you can do it correctly, it doesn't feel like you're this like gross used car salesman. I think it like genuinely feels so natural. And so I think that's why I'm so passionate about teaching people how to use their marketing to create this really easy sales process for their audience. But I think that's also why I'm super passionate about sales conversations in general, because I will tell you, in the last, I'll call it 3 years of our business, we've been around for about 4.5 years now, almost 5. In the last 3 years of business, I think I've probably had 2 quote unquote sales conversations that felt like sales conversations. And I ended up not working with them because they weren't a good fit. I ended up not working with them because I knew that if I had to like convince somebody to work with us, it wasn't ever going to be a good thing. So the reason why I'm able to do it that way though, is because there are very specific ways that we operate when it comes to sales conversations that puts the lead or the buyer in control of their decision-making process. And I'm literally just like guiding them through that process. I'm guiding them through that decision-making process. It's a lot like coaching or consulting. You're not telling people what to do. It's a lot like being a therapist. You're not telling people what to do. You're asking them questions until they come to the conclusion on their own. And then you're supporting them by answering any questions or concerns or objections that they have. You're literally kind of teaching people like how to think in a way through your questions. And that's really the basis of like getting people to act a certain way. That's the basis of like, you know, human behavior psychology or sales psychology or any of those things. The second that you tell somebody what to do, their walls are going to go up immediately. I always make the analogy of like, it's kind of like when you're in a relationship or when you have a sibling or a friend or a parent or anyone where you're very close with them and they want to have like a harder conversation with you about the fact that, you know, maybe they had their feelings hurt or there was conflict or something. There's like a conflict resolution conversation, right? They want to have a conversation with you about this. And so all of a sudden, if they're like, well, you did this and you did that, and they're accusing you and telling you what you did, immediately your walls go up, right? Versus if somebody came to you and said, hey, this happened and I don't think it was your intention, but this is how it made me feel. What was your intention behind this? Like, I'm really trying to understand what happened here and why it made me feel this way. You have no defense mechanism because they're just trying to ask questions and understand better and come to a solution rather than accusing you. The same thing happens in your sales conversations. A lot of you guys, because guys, I'm telling you right now, I literally review content, sales conversations, everything all day, every day. That's literally all that I do. I mean, it's not all that I do, but it's a lot of what I do. And it's really interesting to me because I see the same patterns over and over and over again. Many people will not ask enough questions in the very beginning of their sales conversation. And we'll talk through obviously like the pitch and stuff, but before you get to a really good pitch, like the reason why your pitch is so successful is because of how you've like set up the conversation and also your marketing. Don't get it twisted. I am not saying that you need to have these like massive sales conversations. Sometimes our sales conversations are literally like 4 messages back and forth. And that's literally it because of our marketing. Our clients' sales conversations can basically be like a 10-minute brief conversation and boom, that's it. And the majority of it takes place in the Instagram DMs. So like, think about how limited your communication is there. It doesn't need to be this like crazy thing, but what I will say is that you have to set it up properly for sales to feel easy. That's just like with marketing and with sales. The more that you prep, the easier that it is. So in the sales conversation, you need to ask more questions. Most business owners make the mistake of telling people too many things and not asking them. The best salespeople, I'll talk about this later in the episode, the best salespeople are those that are able to listen 90% of the time and they make comments 10% of the time. You guys, it is not hard to show somebody why your product or your service is the perfect fit for them if they're giving you all the answers that you need to customize your pitch. So I will say, ask more questions, stop telling them information, let your lead take control of the conversation and just ask them questions to get them to where you want them to go. A lot of times we talk about this within Wolf, within like our company internally even. We say you're putting the lead in the driver's seat. So like you're the passenger princess. You're literally just navigating. You're giving them directions. You know where you're going, but you're going to allow the person that's driving to get you from point A to point B. You're just going to ask questions along the way to get them to do exactly what you want them to do, or to get them to think the way you want them to think so that they can make the right decision for them. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked a little bit about like what you need to really make sure that you're prepping properly for your sales conversations. So to reiterate, before we kind of get into like the meat of your pitch, I want to remind you guys that your marketing should sell your leads to the point where like when they come and are having a sales conversation with you, they should be 99% sold on working with you already from your content. But remember that they can be 99% sold on working with you, but a bad pitch or a bad sales conversation could truly kind of like make or break so much when it comes to sales. Marketing really like tees up the conversation. Marketing really tees up your sales. And in my opinion, your conversation, your sales pitch is really what enables it to be a grand slam. Okay, so before we get into like how to have a good sales pitch, you guys need to really understand like what a good sales pitch entails, because this is a big mistake that I see a lot of business owners make. Honey's coming in. Hi, honey. Come here. Come here, mama. You want to be in the episode? Come here. Where's honey? There she is. You want to come here? No. Come here. Come here, baby. Come here. You're okay. You're so weird. Come here. You just want to lay there? Okay. Why don't you come here? Baby, come here. Come here. Come here, honey. Come on. Come here. There she is. Yay. Come here. Come here. Oh, come here, mama. Here, come over here. Come here. Oh, honey, you don't want to be in the episode? Come here. Come here, sweetness. Come here. Come here. You can do it. Come here. Baby, come over here. This is ridiculous. Come here. Honey, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here, mama. Come here. Dang it, my phone fell. Okay, fine. You want to lay there? I'm not going to force you. If you want to come, be in the episode, you can. Otherwise, stay there. All right. Okay, so before we kind of get into basically like how to have a good sales pitch, and here she comes. Hi, mama. Come here. You want to come up? Come here. No, now you're going to act freaking scared. Okay. All right, whatever. All right, so before we kind of go into like how to have a good sales pitch, we're going to talk about what it means to have a good sales pitch. Guys, my dog, I can't do this right now. Come here, honey. You cannot stand there underneath all the cords. Come here, mama. Oops. Come here. No. Leave it. Lay down. Good girl. Okay, that's fine. All right, so third time's a charm. All right, so before we really get into like how to formulate the best sales pitch, I want you guys to understand. Hi, baby. All right, so come here. Okay, You're just going to run away. All right. Can you just lay down? Thank you. I love you so much. You're the best. All right. So before we get into like how to customize the best sales pitch, we're going to talk about kind of the key things that you have to have in a really good sales pitch and what its role is within your sales conversation, right? So we kind of already talked about how with your sales conversation, marketing should be really teeing it up. They should be like 99% sold. And where I see a lot of people make the mistake about the sales pitch is that they make it about them and not the person that they're talking to. So there's a huge difference between if I were to say, with our with our Wolf Accelerator program, you get a bunch of different support. You get one-on-one support, you get group calls, you get Slack support, you get content review, you get modules, you get all these really cool things. How does that sound to you? There's a difference between me saying that, and there's a difference between me saying, I know when we had a conversation that you're really looking to hit 30 to 40K months right now. And I know that you mentioned that you feel like you have all this information when it comes to your content, your marketing, your audience, but you're really still struggling with how to put that into a customized marketing strategy that actually creates results. And you're also really struggling to figure out like if that strategy is working or not. So what's really great about the Wolf Accelerator is that we break down all the information that you know about your audience, their buyer types, your product, your service, your industry, and we show you how to plug that into our Wolf framework, which then in turn kind of turns into this strategy. And not only that, so you really understand what you should be saying to your audience on a super high level, but not only that, we teach you how to break down that strategy into different content ideas and brainstorm content ideas from that strategy. And then from there, we also show you the different systems and processes and things that we use to collect all of your marketing and sales data. And then we teach you how to analyze your marketing and sales data. So you really understand like what your audience is resonating with and what they're not, what you should be leaning into and what you shouldn't. And we teach you how to refine your strategy from there and then keep brainstorming, different content ideas. And it's this really great cycle. How does that sound to you? Does that sound like what you need? Because there's a massive difference between making it about the program, making it about the product, the service, and making it about your leads' needs, their problems, their desires, their goals, and how your product or service is the solution for that. So with that being said, my formula that I always use for a sales pitch is essentially describe what their problem is or what their gap is that you've assessed, right? And the only way you're going to know that is by asking a bunch of questions, where they want to go, which is their goal, and how your product or service is. If you guys are just listening to this on audio, I'm making a bridge motion, is the bridge from their gap to their goal. So really all you're doing in the pitch is you're describing, based on where they're at and based on where they want to go, how your product or service is going to do that for them in a super customized way. And again, the way that you make this incredibly powerful is by asking questions and using people's language back to them. But the one thing that I will say is another mistake I see a lot of business owners make when it comes to different sales pitches is that they don't take into account the warmth of the lead when they come in, and they don't customize the conversation to that lead. So I was actually even just having a conversation with an accelerator client yesterday where we were basically talking through how in her sales conversations, I was auditing some of them. I was like, you're really so focused on following this flow and this script and getting everything right. You're completely avoiding validating this lead, telling them that you understand where they're coming from, that you resonate with them, building a relationship with them, and you're jumping right to the pitch. This person was a little bit colder when they came into their DMs. And so this person really needed a ton of relationship building. They needed a ton of validation. They needed a ton of trust building. And the problem was that, again, she was so fixated on let me ask the right questions. Let me get to the pitch. Let me handle the objections, the flow or the process of the conversation, that we forget we're actually having a conversation with a human being that has needs and wants and desires. And so I think it's incredibly important to be able to understand where the lead is at when they're coming in and having this conversation with you. If they've filled out an application, let's say to work with you, because the majority of sales conversations that you're going to have are going to be around service-based businesses. Hang on, water break. So the one thing that I will say, is that you have to really understand where they're at in order to properly have a conversation with them. But remember that you're having a conversation with a human being. We're in this era, and I've been talking about this a lot on social media. We're in this era when it comes to marketing and sales that after COVID, everyone is so freaking burnt out on investing because during the COVID era, all of these different, like I call them COVIDpreneurs, popped up and they were selling a bunch of stuff, had no business, having a business, selling anything. And unfortunately, people bought into it because they were very powerful and good marketers. And so a bunch of people made investments and purchases that gave them no return on investment. And so because of that, they're all super, super burnt out when it comes to trusting people when they say that they're going to do what they're going to do. And so we're in this era with marketing and with sales conversations of like, who can build trust and relationships the most? Are you coming up the stairs or down the stairs, Shadow? I can't tell. Shadow. Hi, baby. Where are you laying outside? Come here. Come lay down. Guys, we're not going to play right now. Do not pounce on him. You have a cord between you. Honey, hey, quit it. Shadow, lay down. Honey, be nice. This is ridiculous. Good job. Okay. Lay down. Now you lay down. Everyone calm down. It's nap time. Thank you so much. So we're really in this era of like, who can build trust and relationships the fastest, because those are the brands and businesses that are going to win the sale the fastest. And that translates into your sales conversation. And if you're just so hyper fixated on like getting through each step of the sales conversation process and flow, your lead is going to be able to tell, versus if you're like, yeah, okay, I have kind of like a framework, obviously, that I'm working off of, but let me really have a conversation with this person. Let me try to help them. Really, the basis of all good salespeople is that you're ultimately just trying to help people. If you truly believe that your service or your product is as impactful and helpful as you say that it is, every single conversation that you have should be around, how can I help this person? How can I help this person? How can I help this person? How can I serve this person better? How can I help this person think differently? What value can I give them? What can I say to them that's going to really change their perspective right now and make it so that they can hit their goals faster and easier? Because ultimately, people will see right through those that are just in it for the sale. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've had conversations with people where I'm like, you were just in it for the sale. Like, for example, 3 years ago, almost 3 at this point, I was having conversations with a bunch of different people who I was potentially considering investing in as a business coach. And I had a call with somebody who is a massive name in this industry, a massive business coach. And I will not name names, but if I did, you guys would know exactly who I'm talking about. And I had a call with their closer first, because you have a call with their closer first, and then hopefully that person, which like is a normal process if you're a bigger business owner. But I have this memory of having a conversation with this person who was on this business coach's team and talking about how I had had a really negative investment experience before, and I was really worried that I was going to experience that again. And I basically was like, look, I just really want to talk to this business coach before I sign on for one-on-one coaching, because it was more than I had ever considered investing for business coaching. Shadow's walking around with his tippy toes. It was more than I had ever considered investing for business coaching. And obviously it made me really nervous. And so I was like, I would just feel a lot more comfortable if I could have a conversation with her, so that I really feel confident that she's going to be the person for me. Again, I'm confident in the results. I'm confident in the process. It's not the how, it's the person, right? Because I'm going to be working with this person for 6 months. I just had a really bad experience. I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. And I remember their closer being like, no, she doesn't do calls. She doesn't have conversations. I'm like, so the first time I ever get to talk to her is going to be when we're working together after I've made this massive investment. They're like, yeah, like that's not going to work for me. And I can see right through that immediately. It's like, okay, that person is really just in it for the money. If you so badly wanted to help somebody, and let me tell you, she was not at a point where like she had no time to do sales conversations. For me, like I have a very, very busy schedule. We're a very successful business at this point. But to me, if I'm going to be working one-on-one with somebody or in a very high level capacity, I will always make time to have a conversation with that person because it's a big investment. You're basically investing like the equivalent of a car into one person for your business. You best bet your bottom dollar that that person should be having a conversation with you if you want it. Obviously, some people don't need it, but if you want it and if it would make you feel confident, I believe that that's incredibly important. And so, like I was saying, I had that conversation, and then I had a conversation where I got on a call with who is now my business coach, Kate Perkovic. You guys know her. She's absolutely incredible. Just love her to pieces. But I remember getting onto a call with her, and number one, the fact that I messaged her and she was like, okay, great. I have a bunch of stuff going on tomorrow, but like I can move a few things around and we can have a conversation tomorrow. I was like, wow. Okay. So number one, like she genuinely cares. And then number two, I remember having a conversation with her and I walked in thinking that I had literally like the best scaling strategy ever. And within like 10 minutes, she poked a bunch of holes into it. And I was like, oh, yikes. That's rough. And so then I remember her asking me all of these questions, but it was coming from this place of not trying to rush me into a sale, but really trying to get me to think through like, okay, why was I so hesitant in investing? And was I really going to let that one negative experience that I had hold me back from making potential investments that would massively impact and scale my business? And she was like, again, I'm not saying this from a place of like, you need to make this investment. She was like, even if it's not me, it's more so around the fact that like, you know, you need to invest, but you're just scared and you're really going to let fear be the thing that holds you back. So with all of the questions you're asking, with all of the things that you're saying to people in sales conversations, remember, it's not actually a matter of winning the sale. It's a matter of winning the person. It's a matter of winning the relationship, right? It's a matter of showing how much you care and how you genuinely want to help people, because people, I always say this, and you guys have heard me say this, people are 99% more likely to invest in a solution than they are in a product or a service. And so if you can show people how your program, your offer, your service, your product is the solution to their needs, and you can also show them how you want to come up with a solution for them, how you want to serve them, how you want to help them in that sales conversation, immediately it's going to be so much easier for them to actually want to work with you and for you to actually win the sale. Okay. Let's see here. So kind of going back to like the different approaches that you want to take for people who've kind of been binging your content for ages versus those who haven't, who are immediately activated to buy. Remember, if someone's immediately activated to buy, if they see like one TikTok video of yours or something like that, they're probably going to be colder. So you need to ask more questions. You need to build more relationship. And if they've been binging your content and they come in, they've filled out an application, maybe something like that, really where you're looking to focus your energy on is to qualify them as a lead, make sure they're a good fit, identify their problem, identify their goal, and then showcase how really your service or your product is the bridge from point A to point B. The other thing that I would also be asking, if someone's been binging your content, they've kind of been lurking, something I like to ask a lot of times as like a qualifying question is, why is now the right time? Obviously you've been in my audience. Like I have people all the time who I've had conversations with like last year who are like, oh, it's just not the right time for me to invest. I'm like, okay, no problem. And they come back a year later and they're still in the same place, number one. But number two, I always ask the question of like, well, why is now the right time? Why was then not the right time? And why is now the right time? Because I really want to make sure that if they're telling me that I'm ready to invest, I'm able to understand why now is the right time, so that if in the future, if we're having a conversation and they're like, oh, it's just not the right time, I'm like, well, hold on. You just told me it was the right time. And for these reasons, what's changed, right? I was listening to another podcast episode from Alex Hermosi. His podcast is called The Game. If any of you guys want like just a general like business marketing, sales, scaling podcast, he's an exceptional one. And he was talking about how in sales conversations, a lot of times people will avoid handling an objection or asking questions that will bring up concerns or objections because they don't want the sales conversation to like blow up and be out of their control. But what we forget a lot of times is that they're going to have concerns or objections no matter what, or they likely will. The majority of your conversations will. And so you can either self-explode and contain the explosion and like make sure you understand what their concerns or their objections are before you even really, I would say, like get into the pitch so that you can pre-handle them and stay in control of the conversation, or you can allow it to explode after you pitch And that's potentially going to be the thing that makes you lose the sale. So I would always say that, like, if you can pre-handle any potential objections, whether it's timing, finances, any of those things, before you pitch, you are most likely going to be way more successful in your sales conversation than if you didn't. Okay, so another thing that I see a lot of business owners make the mistake of is that throughout their sales conversation, but specifically with their pitch, they're not customizing it to that person's buyer type or like what activates them to buy. It's really funny because I think we do such a great job in content or in our marketing a lot of times to really like customize where, you know, your content is being directed, customize your converting content, your solution selling and things like that to people's buyer types. And then we forget when we get into a sales conversation, their buyer types are still their buyer types. And so we pitch one way constantly and then wonder why we're only converting 25% of our leads. It's because you're not selling to them in a way that makes sense to them. You did it in your content, which is why it activated them to inquire, but you're not doing it in your sales conversation, which is why they're not actually buying. And so a lot of times, and I've even had to learn this in my own sales conversations. I remember I had a conversation with my business coach, Kate, maybe about 12 months ago, and I was showing her the sales conversation. I was like, I don't understand. Like, this person came in and they were hot off the presses. Like, they were ready to invest. They were like, I'm ready. I'm ready to move forward. Give me the details, blah, blah, blah. I sent them all the sales pages. I sent them all the details. I sent them all of the reviews and things like that. And she's like, well, earlier in the conversation, she was talking about how, you know, relationships with her, you know, potential consultant or coach are incredibly important to her, and how she's had a bad experience, and how, you know, her being able to make this investment is going to potentially impact her kids and her team in a great way. And you didn't acknowledge any of that. You didn't sell to her in an emotional way. You sold to her in an analytical way, which is why she said, okay, I'm going to think about it, and then ghosted you. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And so I want you guys, if you feel like you're having a lot of inquiries, and you've ruled out that it's a marketing issue, it's more so about trying to identify like what in your sales process is the issue. I want you guys to look through your sales conversations and ask yourself, I obviously created converting content that was based on this person's buyer type, but am I actually selling to them based on their buyer types? Am I recognizing what their buyer types are when they first come into the conversation? And am I taking it from there and selling to them in a way that makes sense to them? And if not, how can I shift things and shift my pitch in order to sell to them based on their buyer types? A lot of times I get a question of like, how do I know before they come into the conversation what their buyer types are? And there are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, I kind of compare this to like our content prep phase. It's like your sales prep phase, right? I would say that the more that you prep, the more promising the sales conversation is going to be. So a lot of times you can tell what someone's buyer type is by a couple of different things. Number one, what they were activated by. So like, for example, if somebody messages me off of a story that was super, super emotional, like about my story or about how, you know, you can't give up even when you've been knocked down multiple times or any of those things, right? I'm going to know they're probably incredibly emotional in how they buy. And so I need to follow that accordingly in my sales conversation. Versus if somebody messages me from something that is like purely analytical and tactical, and I'm talking about like a client case study and how we got them these results, I'm going to know that they're probably a driver buyer, an assertive buyer, an analytical buyer, and I'm going to sell accordingly. Another way that you can do that, obviously, is by looking at their content, depending on obviously what you sell. If you're in the fitness industry, obviously you might not necessarily be able to see this, but like if you're in marketing, sales, business, any of those things, sometimes you can look at their page and see like what they're talking about, or, you know, any of those things. You can even look at like threads, for example. If they have some content on threads, like what is it that they're reposting? What's the conversations that they're having? What TikToks are they reposting? Oh, excuse me. So a lot of times you can see, like, based on their profile, based on the things they're consuming and having conversations about, what their buyer types are. So it's a little bit of analysis of their profile. And then last but not least, you can ask questions and pick up like context cues based on what they're saying on the call to see what their buyer types are. Again, going back to that example of when I was having that conversation with my business coach, it was like, okay, but you missed out on all these context clues. And so you sold to her in the incorrect way, which is why she didn't end up converting in the first place. The other thing when it comes to a sales pitch that people do incorrectly is that they don't highlight their unique value proposition in a way that makes sense to their target audience. So a lot of times, kind of like how I was talking about with the pitch, we just go straight into the pitch that we've always known is something that, works for us. This is how we sell our product or service. This is how I pitch it. And it's one and done, templatized, right? A lot of times we have the same thing with our UVP. Our UVP is really what sets us apart from our competitors. And we have one way of describing it. You should have 10 different ways of describing your UVP. You should have 10 different ways of selling yourself. You should have 10 different ways of handling all of the different objections, because everybody is different. So the biggest thing for me, and this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of the episode, which is ask, don't tell, is ask them questions of their prior experiences when they've been investing in something like this, or if they haven't invested in something like this. What's important to them? What's a concern of theirs? And then you can tweak your UVP, you can tweak your pitch to match what is important to them. If you're telling somebody what your UVP is and what the solution is that your product or service offers, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to tell them what they want to hear, because you didn't ask, so you didn't know. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about how to perfect your pitch and your UVP, I also want to talk about building trust in your calls, but also your DM sales conversations. I think the biggest thing that I mentioned earlier is that obviously, we're in this era of really who can build trust and rapport the fastest, right? Something that I have noticed doing is that literally just doing 5 minutes of homework before your conversation with this person, or right before you respond, if you're doing like a DM, for example, knowing who they are, knowing their business, or knowing their goals, knowing where they're from, knowing a little bit about their background. Do they have kids? Do they not have kids? Where do they live? Is it cold? What's the weather like? Who's the sports team that's there? Or like with women, is there, I don't know, somebody from like a reality TV show that you were watching that like is in that area or something? Have you traveled there, right? Knowing just a little bit of information about that person's life and background and business and goals, whatever product or service you're selling, is going to be incredibly important, because it's really the thing that enables you to have a connection point with them before you even start talking to them. Like, for example, when was the last time that you sent in I don't know. Okay, here's a great example. Sorry, I erased that part before. Here's a great example. So a couple years ago, I had a personal trainer. They made me fill out all of these forms of like my goals and all this different stuff. And as soon as I went in, I spent a lot of time filling out these forms. As soon as I went in, they were like, okay, so talk to me about your goals. Like, what do you mean talk to me about your goals? I already told you about my goals in the forms that I spent 2 hours filling out. Versus a couple months ago, I decided to get another personal trainer, Peach. Shout out Peach. She's amazing. Hopefully she can help me get a Peach, if you know what I mean. But with her specifically, I had already had a conversation with her. The reason that I found her was at spin class. I had had a conversation with her on Instagram DMs about what my goals were. And when I went in to do my first session, she was like, okay, great. So based on everything that you told me, here's the workout that I'm thinking about today. What are your thoughts on that? What? That is a massive difference. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And I felt seen and heard and understood and valued because she actually listened to what I was saying. It is not hard to do your homework. It's not hard to learn a little bit more about somebody, to prep and to make somebody feel valued because you took a chunk of your time to prepare for that conversation you were having with them. It makes all the difference in the world. And then the other thing too, as well, that I will also say is that when it comes to building trust in the DMs, oftentimes, again, if you can ask questions, I like to use something called the feel, felt, found method. So a lot of times this is basically to build trust, but also to help people get over objections. This is something that works really, really well in conversations. So if somebody says like, this is a concern of mine, the feel part is like, that makes sense that you would feel that way because of X, Y, Z. So like if somebody's like, I'm really, really scared to make this investment because I've had really bad experiences in the past, that makes complete sense why you would feel that way, because it's almost like being in a toxic relationship, right? It's like when you get out of a toxic relationship, you're scared that all of those things are going to happen to you again. So it makes sense that you would feel that way. A lot of our clients have felt that way. That's the felt phase. So you go to the felt phase next. A lot of our clients have felt that way, when they initially came to us and voiced that same concern and that same feeling. But what they found was, this is the found phase, that just like with a toxic relationship, if you allow the bad experiences that you've had in the past to hold you back from making the right decision or potentially, having the right partner or making the right investment or any of those things, you're missing out on this incredible world based on past conversations or past experiences that are no longer your reality. So I guess my question is, are you going to allow that to continue to control your life and your business? That feel, felt, found method builds trust. It builds a relationship because you're validating their feelings. You're telling them they're not alone. You're resonating with them. You can even say like, I've experienced that before. And then you're helping them to think differently to overcome those objections. So I love using that method because a lot of times it builds a ton of trust. The other thing that I have also found builds a ton of trust, and this is in your marketing and your sales, is a sales psychology tactic that we call mirroring. So this is with your body language, your words, everything. A lot of times if I'm doing a sales call and it's on Zoom, I will mirror my body language with that person. So if they're sitting back, honey, do not growl. So a lot of times, if they're sitting back and like they're crossing their arms, for example, I'm going to do the exact same thing. If they're leaning forward and their arms are open, I'm going to do the exact same thing. If they have their hand on their hand, they have their head on their hand or something like that, I'm going to do the exact same thing. If they're using certain words, I'm going to use those words back to them. Same thing in our content, same thing in our sales conversations, because what that does is it makes it feel like you guys are on the same page. You act the same, you talk the same, there's trust there because you can relate to them and they can relate to you. And it already makes it feel like you have something in common. So that's another really great one to build trust and credibility. Let's see. Sorry, guys. So those are kind of the key things that I love when it comes to handling, when it comes to building trust. Another question I get a lot when it comes to sales conversations is like, how do I handle objections? So the two most common objections you are always going to get, it does not matter what industry you're in, is going to be timing and finances. So a lot of times when it comes to timing, my favorite way to handle this objection, again, you're asking and you're not telling. So my favorite thing to do is ask. If somebody's like, oh, I can't do this right now because next month is going to be way less busy for me. This month is just crazy busy. Like, let's say you're a fitness coach and you're like, yeah, I really want to do personal training. My kids are out of school right now. It's the summer. They're going back to school in September. And so I'm going to be less busy. So I'm going to do it then. My favorite question to ask or to pick up on is going to be, are you routinely pretty busy or is this just a seasonal thing? If it's timing, right? Or if it's like, oh, I just had somebody say, they're like, oh, I need to sign up after my wedding or after I buy a house or after blah, 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 right? My favorite question to ask though, like I said, is, are you routinely pretty busy or is this just kind of a seasonal thing? And like for the mom with kids, for example, whose kids are about to go back in school, they're like, oh yeah, well, after summer's over, I'm less busy. It's like, are you sure? How much time do you have in a day? Because you told me a couple months ago, or you had mentioned that you're still crazy busy when your kids are back in school. So if it's something where they're routinely pretty busy, a lot of times I always talk about like, is that going to change, right? Is that really going to change? And are you really going to wait until potentially it changes to do the thing or to buy the thing or to invest in the thing that you've been wanting to do? For example, I talked about this on my stories a couple months ago, and this really resonated with a lot of moms because a lot of moms that are in our DMs right now are basically like, I need to wait until my kids are a little bit older. I need to wait until they go back to school, or I need to wait until things just aren't as crazy with kids' activities. And it's like, I'm not a mom, but I have plenty of friends who are moms. I have plenty of people who are on our team that are moms. I have plenty of clients that are moms. And the conversation they always have, or the way that they always say it, is basically, my kids are always going to be there. And am I really going to wait until they're 18 and away in college to build my business? No. So I'm going to have to figure out another way. So that's a great way to overcome the I'm too busy objection. If it's seasonal, my question or my response is basically, imagine if you invested in XYZ, if you invested in a personal trainer, if you invested in marketing and sales strategies or support, or scaling strategies or support. Imagine if you could master this in the busiest season of your life, what your results could be in the calmest season of your life. A lot of times I say like the strongest storms make the strongest sailors, or the most skilled sailors, right? And so a lot of times if you are waiting to do something until it's no longer busy, you're actually depriving yourself of a lot of really great lessons that you could learn by doing it in the busiest season. So those are kind of the things that I say a lot of times to overcome like the timing side of things. The financial side of things, here's the thing, you guys, there's always going to be a small percentage of people who genuinely cannot afford what you sell. That is probably 5% of people. I know a lot of business owners who say, I don't want to handle the money objection because it feels insensitive. It's not insensitive. You put your money where your mouth is. You spend money on what your priorities are. For example, if you are a fitness coach and the person that you're having a conversation with is like, I can't afford to do fitness coaching, but they're eating out every day and they're going to Starbucks, that's their priority, not their health, right? So you can say, well, I'm curious to know from you. I know you mentioned that right now your eating habits aren't great. You're working on not eating out so much. You're working on like not getting Starbucks or not going out and having drinks so much, right? I'm interested to know if you cut out spending money on alcohol when you're going out or eating out, or any of those things, or Starbucks every single day, do you think that you could afford this? Because the answer is probably going to be yes, right? It's a matter of priorities. The other thing I like to also ask a lot of questions around is like, what would it take for you to afford this? If this is something where your service creates revenue for your clients, a lot of times we always ask if someone's like, well, it's just too expensive for me. I'm like, okay, great. Like, what would it take for you to make that kind of money? Oh, well, I would need to sign 2 clients, or I would need to sell 10 products or things like that. And my question and response is always, do you really think that we can't do that for you in 1 month? Do you really think I can't sign 2 clients for you with content and sales? Do you really think that we can't sell 10 products for you? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, no, I mean, like, I know that you can. And then it doesn't become a question of like finances. It becomes a question of like, do you believe in the program? Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in the service? So those are questions. Again, I'm not making any statements. I'm literally asking a question to get them to think differently. And then I'm basing my response on theirs. Okay, so now let's talk about closing the deal. So obviously after your sales pitch, there's been one thing that we've actually started to implement that I really, really like, that has been really helpful in getting people from a verbal yes to actually checking out and investing. So there's a couple things. Number one is you always assume the sale. I like to say you're like gentle parenting your leads. So basically what this looks like is if, you basically pitch somebody on the program or your service or your product and you're like, how does that sound? Does that sound like exactly what you need? And they're like, yeah, this is amazing. Like they're sold on whatever it is you're selling them. And then you go to the price and you pitch them. Instead of saying, does that price work for you? Or is that what you anticipated? Say, so this is the price. Would you prefer to pay in full or do a payment plan? A lot of times, obviously I know I don't have kids, but like I have, like nieces and nephews and things like that. And when you have a toddler, a lot of times you give them 2 options that you're okay with both of them, right? It's like, oh, we have to get dressed for the morning. Would you prefer to wear this shirt or this shirt? Would you prefer to wear your light up shoes, or your really cool Paw Patrol sneakers, right? It's the same thing with your leads. You're basically giving them 2 options and you're okay with both of them. Both of them require them to buy from you. It's just a matter of like what feels better for them. I was reading a book called The Catalyst. If you guys have not read this, it's an absolutely incredible book. It's called The Catalyst, How to Change Anyone's Mind by Jonah Berger. And there's 2 chapters that I absolutely love. It's chapter 1 and actually chapter 2. And they talk about like autonomy within sales and agency within sales, which is giving somebody the ability to make their own decisions or to feel like they're making their own decisions. Because a lot of times in order to make a purchase or an investment, we have to feel like it was our idea. Almost 100% of the time. And so a lot of times if you give them that option of would you prefer to pay in full or would you prefer to do the payment plan? Would you prefer to start now or next week? Would you prefer to do this or that? But both of them require them to buy from you. It gives them this feeling of agency after they're already sold, and you're not giving them an opportunity to have cold feet. Another thing that I've also found to be really helpful when it comes to closing your sale is to do, we call it like the handoff. So when I used to do medical sales or like surgical sales, basically I would, when we would have like a doctor come in and make sure that they were like a good, I used to sell LASIK. And so the doctor would basically come in after I cannot talk. The doctor would basically come in, the optometrist or the ophthalmologist would come in and they would look at all the tests that we did and basically tell them if they were a good candidate for LASIK or not. And I would basically do something that we called like the handoff. And so the doctor would come in and I would have already kind of filled them in on what was going on. But I would say like, this is Dr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, this is this client, this was their goal, this is the concern that they had about LASIK, this is kind of all of the details about them. We're basically here just trying to figure out if this is going to be a good candidate or not. And then once we did that, I would basically like pre-activity them to say like, okay, so now that we've done this, we're basically going to go back to my office. We're going to talk about the procedure, all of your different pricing options, answer any questions that you have, and potentially look in the calendar. How does that sound to you? Sounds great. And then that way they knew we were already going to talk about pricing, already going to talk about all of their concerns, and then I would assume the sale at the end. It created this level of trust and confidence and clarity because they knew what was coming next and there was no guesswork to the process. Same thing when we do our sales conversations, or like even in the DMs, right? If someone's like, yes, I'm ready to go, we send them the checkout link and we basically say, you're going to get this checkout link. And what's going to happen is you're going to fill out the first month's worth of your invoice. Once you complete that, it's going to trigger your contract to be automatically sent to you. Once you figure that out and you sign the contract, you're basically going to be automatically sent your onboarding portal. And from there, all I need from you is XYZ. And then based on that, we're going to be able to, have your co-coach on the other side waiting for you, schedule your kickoff call, all this stuff. I'm going to check on you tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions, if you need anything from me, and we'll go from there. And that way they know, number one, I'm going to be checking in with them tomorrow. And number two, they know that if they have any concerns or questions, that they can always come to me. And number three, they know exactly what to expect. And what I've found is that it enables people who go from a verbal yes to completing the checkout purchase a lot faster because there's no cold feet, because they know we're going to check in with them and they know exactly what to expect. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about motivating potential buyers to take action after that. So in my opinion, that is exactly what you need in order to have a super successful, number one, sales conversation, but number two, pitch and actually get people from a verbal yes to actually purchase from you or invest in you. So I'm curious to know what your guys' perspective has been on pitches, what your experience has been with sales conversations, what your experience has been with actually like closing a sale. Do sales feel easy for you right now? Do they feel difficult for you right now? And if they do feel really difficult for you right now, that's exactly what we help our clients with. So if you want to have a conversation about that, you're welcome to message me on Instagram, or you can always send us like a question or a comment or anything. We do a bunch of like lives or ask me anything. So we provide a bunch of value, obviously in our podcast, our TikTok, on Instagram, everything, to really try and give you guys as much free information as possible. So if you guys have questions about pitching, sales conversation, anything, please message me. I would love to nerd out about that with you guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye guys.